So what does it actually mean to live a good life? I mean, really live it. For a guy named Henry David Thoreau back in the 19th century, this wasn't just some philosophical thought experiment. Nope. He took a hard look at the definition of success in his world and decided to just throw it out. Instead, he came up with this really radical blueprint for living with purpose. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Wow. The massive men lead lives of quiet desperation. I mean, let that sink in for a second. That was Thoreau's take on the modern world. He basically looked around and saw, well, he saw us, in a way. People stuck in routines they never signed up for, chasing stuff they didn't actually want, and just feeling this deep, nagging sense of emptiness. It's a pretty heavy idea. But man, does it still hit close to home for a lot of us, right?
So, the big question is, what if there was another way to live? See, this is the question that just consumed him. Thoreau wasn't the kind of guy who was just going to point out a problem and walk away. Oh no, he was obsessed with finding a solution, and even more than that, living it. He wanted to prove with his own life that a totally different way of being wasn't just possible, it was right there for the taking.
Okay, so to really get what he was trying to do, we have to understand the problem he was trying to solve, this idea of a life of quiet desperation. Let's take a look at the world that made him the rebel he became. So here's the thing about Thoreau. Yeah, he went to Harvard, he had the fancy education, but at his core, he was a total rebel. He just couldn't stand doing things the way they were supposed to be done. The real spark for him, though, was his mentor, the famous Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson brought him into this movement called Transcendentalism, and this became like his whole operating system. It was this big pushback against the super rigid, logical thinking of the time. The Transcendentalists believe that true wisdom and self-reliance, they don't come from society or a textbook. Nope, they come from inside you, from your gut, your intuition. And honestly, that one core belief, it's what fueled everything he would do for the rest of his life.
All right, so if you believe that truth comes from within, well, what do? For Thoreau, the answer was clear. You get away from all the noise. And that brings us to the most famous part of his story, his experiment at Walden Pond. This wasn't just a camping trip. It was a full-blown investigation into what it actually means to be alive. And get this, he stayed out there for exactly 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. The reason that detail is so important is it shows you this wasn't some random impulse. It was a calculated, deliberate experiment. He went out to this piece of land that Emerson owned, built his own tiny cabin from scratch, and set out to discover what life is really about when you peel back all the layers of society.
And his own words just say it all, don't they? I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately. You see, he wasn't escaping from the world, not at all. He was trying to get to the very heart of it. He wanted to face only the essential facts of life, to strip everything else away and see what was left. He had this deep fear, which he wrote about, of getting to the end of his life and realizing he hadn't actually lived at all. And this was his way of making sure that didn't happen.
So how exactly do you live deliberately, according to Thoreau? Well, based on his time at Walden, you can pretty much break it down into 4 steps. First, you simplify, and I mean radically simplify. Get rid of all the stuff you don't truly need. Step 2, you build. You take control of your basic needs, your shelter, your food. For him, this was literal. Then, step 3, you observe. You actually pay attention to the world around you, especially nature, which he thought was the best teacher. And why do all this? Well, it all leads to the final step, reflect. All that other stuff frees up the time and, more importantly, the mental space to read, to think, and to actually get to know yourself.
But here's where the story takes a turn. This whole experiment in deliberate living, it wasn't just some personal self-help project. The clarity he found out there in the woods, it sharpened his sense of right and wrong. And it put him on a collision course with the government, leading to an idea so powerful it would literally change the course of history.
So picture this, it's 1846. Thoreau gets asked to pay a poll tax, but he knows that this tax money is being used to fund 2 things he absolutely despises: the Mexican-American War, which he saw as a land grab to create more slave states, and the institution of slavery itself. So he said, no, I'm not paying, and for that, they threw him in jail. But that one night in a jail cell, that's where everything clicked into place for him.
From that experience came this massive idea: civil disobedience. And let's be clear, this isn't just about, breaking a rule because you feel like it. For Thoreau, it was a profound moral duty. His argument was simple but powerful. If the government passes a law that forces you to be part of an injustice against someone else, then your highest obligation isn't to the law, it's to your conscience. You have a duty to peacefully refuse. The way he saw it, you've got these two authorities that are constantly in conflict. On one side, you have the law of the state. It's man-made, and let's be honest, it gets its power from force, from the threat of punishment. But on the other side, you have the individual's conscience. And for Thoreau, this was a higher law. It gets its power not from force, but from what is fundamentally right. So when the state tells you to do something that your conscience knows is wrong, well, for Thoreau, the choice was obvious. You follow your conscience every single time.
And this leads to what might be his most famous and most radical quote of all. He's basically saying that if the government is so unjust that it's locking up good people, then the only place for any other good person is right there with them, in prison. Think about that. He's saying the most honorable thing you can do is stand in opposition, to refuse to cooperate with a system that's evil, even if it costs you your freedom.
Now, the sad part of the story is that Thoreau died pretty young, only 44 years old. And during his life, his books, like Walden, they didn't really sell. He wasn't some famous celebrity author. But his ideas, oh, they were just getting warmed up. The seeds he planted would grow into something huge, creating ripples that would spread across the entire world.
I mean, the ripple effect from that single essay is just mind-blowing. Think about it. In the early 1900s, a young lawyer in South Africa named Mahatma Gandhi stumbles upon Thoreau's essay, and it becomes a blueprint for his entire philosophy of nonviolent resistance in India. Then, fast forward to the 1960s, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is citing Thoreau as a major influence on the civil rights movement here in the States. It's incredible. This one idea, from one guy spending one night in a small-town jail, became this powerful tool for peaceful change all around the globe.
So why are we still talking about this guy from the 1800s? Because honestly, his ideas have never been more relevant. He was one of the first environmentalists, way ahead of his time, warning us about what we were doing to the planet. In our crazy, distracted, 24/7 world, he's like the patron saint of simplicity and mindful living. And of course, his ideas on nonviolent resistance, they're still the go-to playbook for activists and changemakers everywhere. He's just as important now as he ever was.
And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? Back to that simple life at Walden Pond. Because at the end of the day, Thoreau's life wasn't just a story, it was an invitation. It was a challenge to you and to me to take a hard look at our own lives. He stripped everything away to find out what was actually real. So the question he leaves us with is a simple one, but it's a big one. What in your life is not essential? What are you clinging to that's just noise? And what could you become if you finally decided to let it go?